Hello everyone, my name is Zenitsu and I'm back with another Digimon deck profile video. So today I'm going to be going over the purple mid-range deck. The deck does go by some other names. I just refer to it as mid-range because that's kind of the playstyle it is, but essentially other people call it by like Purple Rookie Rush or Piedmon Purple or Vilemon Turbo, but essentially it's all doing relatively the same exact thing, which is you're just trying to play this great value game, control the early game, and then you have some great powerful late game bombs. So going over the deck, starting with the Digitama, I'm running one copy of Pagumon because I don't necessarily want to see his effect that often, but if I can get it off, then it's always nice, where he has this inheritable ability of when attacking, you get to discard the top card of your deck, and obviously putting cards into our trash is relatively good for a couple of our other cards and just the overall synergy of the deck. Next, I'm running 4 copies of Yaamon, so Yaamon obviously is going to be the main Digitama of the deck because he has this great inheritable ability where if we have 5 or more cards in our trash, then this Digimon gets plus 1000 DP. And increasing the DP in this deck is pretty good because obviously a lot of the cards are going to be rookies and champions. So they'll definitely need that DP boost. Next, on to the rookies. I'm running 4 copies of DemiDevimon, so this is just your value rookie, 2 to play, 0 to evolve, no skills, but you're just using him because he's just a value rookie. Next, I'm playing 4 copies of Impmon. So Impmon is pretty important because we're going to be running Vilemon, and I'll get into that when I get to Vilemon. But he also has a pretty decent when destroyed effect, where you get to basically self-mill the top 3 cards of your deck, and obviously filling up the trash is something we want to do to a certain extent. Next, I'm running 4 copies of Gabumon. So Gabumon has this great inheritable ability of adding a when destroyed to whatever he's digivolving into. So he adds this when destroyed, we get to draw 2 cards, and then we have to discard one of the cards in our hand. So obviously, drawing cards is pretty powerful because it helps us see what we want to see, and then discarding a card is also a pretty decent effect because it allows us to set up our trash in a way with cards that we want to have in our trash. Next, I'm running 4 copies of Tapirmon. So he's just another when destroyed Digimon, we get to draw a card. So that's really the only thing we care about him, the fact that he allows us to draw more cards and he has a when destroyed effect, so that way he synergizes with the deck. And then the last rookie I'm going to be running is 2 copies of the DemiDevimon promo. So he has a pretty good when played effect where we get to self-mill the top 2 cards of our deck. Obviously, self-milling is pretty important and it can help set us up for a lot of our cards, but we don't want to go too overboard on that mechanic. But we want to have enough to make it worthwhile. Next, on to the champions. I'm running 4 copies of Vilemon because he's just the blocker of the deck. Can't really say much more about that, other than having a blocker is still pretty important. And then the next champion is going to be 4 copies of Devimon. So Devimon is pretty powerful because he has the Vengeance ability, and Vengeance basically allows him to trade up with any Digimon. Regardless of their DP, he just is allowed to destroy them. And then he also can give Vengeance if we choose to Digivolve on top of him. But the main purpose is the fact that he innately has Vengeance, and Vengeance is good. Then the last champion I'm going to be running for the deck is 4 copies of the promo Devimon. So this is a pretty decent card because he has a nice when played effect. We get to destroy one of our opponent's level 3 Digimon. And obviously having removal is very important, and the fact that he acts as removal when we play him is pretty solid. Next, on to the ultimates. The ultimate side is going to be a little bit light because generally we just skip straight to our megas anyway. So the only ultimate I'm going to be running is 4 copies of Kimeramon because he has a pretty nice when played effect. We get to destroy one of our Digimon to destroy one of the opponent's level 5 or less. So this just allows us to use some self-sacrificing strategy to get some of our when destroyed effects off or to try to fill up our trash a little bit faster, and then we get a benefit of having another card to remove the opponent's card, and obviously removal is really, really good. Next, on to the Megas. I'm running 2 copies of Piedmon. So Piedmon, he himself has Vengeance, which is pretty good, and then he also has a nice when played effect, where we get to put up to 2 level 4 or less purple Digimon from our trash without playing their cost. And then the only drawback to that is that we won't get their when played effect, but most of the time we're not going to be trying to choose the few Digimon we have that have when played, and we'd rather go for the when destroyed effects. But the fact that he's a Vengeance Mega with some recursion is pretty powerful alone, because obviously we could set up our trash so that way we could try to get the Digimon we want to recur. Next, I'm running 4 copies of Vilemon. So Vilemon is another really, really powerful Mega, where we could warp Digivolve him off of Impmon if we have 10 or more cards in our trash. That's not necessarily the hardest thing to do, but the fact that we could basically warp Digivolve into him is pretty good, and setting that up isn't very hard. On top of which, he has a pretty decent when Digivolved effect, where we get to destroy one of our opponent's level 4 or lower Digimon. So again, more removal. This is on Digivolve, but the whole idea is to try to warp Digivolve him off of Impmon. Then the last Mega of the deck is Millenniummon. So Millenniummon is a pretty powerful Mega, in which he is a level 7. So he has a solid when Digivolved effect, where we basically get to remove one of the opponent's Digimon and put it to the bottom of their deck, and then obviously discard all of their Digivolution sources. Putting a card to the bottom of the deck right now is really, really powerful, because there's not really a way to dig or retrieve it. Having the removal on his when Digivolved is pretty good. Next, on to the option cards. I'm choosing to play my option cards a little on the lighter side, because I want to try to hit more of my Digimon in the trash when I'm trying to self-mill, and I really want to see a lot of my Digimon, and a lot of my Digimon kind of act as option cards anyway, because they have a couple of when played effects. So I don't necessarily want to have a whole bunch of different option cards, so I'm just trying to keep it simple. So I'm going to be running 4 copies of Grisly Wing. This is a pretty good card because it allows us to recur a level 3 purple Digimon from our trash without paying its cost. And then obviously we don't get its when played effect, but a lot of the time we're going to try to recur one that has a when destroyed effect, so that way we don't necessarily feel the effects of that downside. And then it has a pretty decent security ability of being able to activate its main ability. So whether it's in our hand or in the security, we're always going to be able to recur our level 3s back. And then the last option I'm going to be running is 2 copies of Heat Viper. So Heat Viper is just another self-destroying card similar to Kimeramon, where we get to destroy one of our Digimon to destroy up to 2 of the opponent's level 4 or less Digimon. So obviously not only destroying our own Digimon is pretty good because it's filling it up in our trash, and then obviously we're going to be trying to target our when destroyed effects, but we also get to remove up to 2 of the opponent's Digimon potentially. And then its security effect is being able to add it to our hand, so that way we could then play it, because this is a little bit more of a specific ability where it requires some setup, so I get that its security effect isn't going to activate its main effect. And then as far as the tamers go, I'm going to be running 2 copies of Matt, because he obviously is the only purple tamer in the game currently, so he'll be able to fix our memory to 3 if it's less than 2. And then he also has a pretty good when played effect, where we get to return a purple option or Digimon from our trash into our hand. So that's just really, really insane, because we could take basically almost anything we want. So that's it for the main deck. Now, I do have a couple of different options that you could think about including into your deck when you're going to build it. Obviously, you could run some of the other purple options. I think Triumph Sword is the only other best option to run, just because it is more hard removal. And then as far as other megas that you could run Venom Myotismon, because he has a pretty nice when destroyed effect. We get to basically recur a level 4 or less purple Digimon from our trash without paying its cost, and then we don't get its when played effect. But obviously the whole idea of this card is to just have a very sticky board. So you could have, let's say, Millenniummon on top of Venomyotismon and have this like chain down destruction effect to make it very, very hard for the opponent to actually remove a Digimon from your board. And then you could also run Wizardmon because he has a nice when destroyed effect. You also get to draw a card. And then during both players' turns, if you have a yellow Digimon, he also gets Vengeance. And obviously Vengeance is pretty good. And there are a couple of yellow Digimon that we could play in tandem with him. So the first yellow Digimon we could play in tandem with him is going to be Gatomon. So Gatomon has a pretty nice when played effect, where if we have a purple Digimon, we get a minus 4000 DP off of one of the opponent's Digimon. So again, it's just acting as removal. It has a when played effect, so that way we don't necessarily care about digivolving up into it. And it interacts with the fact that we need to have a purple Digimon on the field, so the majority of our Digimon are obviously going to be purple, so that effect's condition isn't very hard. On top of which, it has another ability where during your turn, if one of your other Digimon is destroyed, this card gets plus 3000 DP until the end of the turn, and it's not necessarily very hard to destroy our own Digimon in the deck. So having this card be a 6000 beater potentially makes it even more valuable to play. And then as far as another yellow card you could also run Salmon. So Salmon has a when destroyed effect. If your security is 3 or less, you get to recover 1. So Salmon is a great way to act as a nice buffer for our security. Now, you could also play blue. Obviously, blue has some pretty powerful options and tamer cards that we could try to utilize, but it also has this really small blue package that we could possibly run. The unfortunate thing is it is a little bit on the harder side to set up, but when it does go off, it's pretty powerful. Package starts off with Gomamon. So Gomamon has a when destroyed effect as an inheritable ability. You get memory plus 1. And the card you're going to be digivolving on top of him is going to be Leomon. So Leomon also has a when destroyed effect. You get memory plus 2. So when you have them both and your Leomon is destroyed, then you'll be getting memory plus 3, which then could lead to a whole bunch of different play lines that you could possibly use just off of getting 3 memory. So it's definitely a pretty powerful setup, but it might be a little bit harder to do. You could also run red because, again, this is kind of a similar style deck to a Rookie Rush deck, so you could play the red Tamers and option cards and some of the other just generally red good stuff cards, but red does have a nice Biomon that has a solid when destroyed effect, where if this Digimon was destroyed during your turn, you get memory plus 1. So it's kind of filling in that similar role as what Gomamon would be doing, except this allows you to run more red cards, and it's a little bit more isolated and doesn't really require any setup to get a big payoff. And then lastly, you could also run a little bit of black just for some more blockers if you really feel like you need to add in a little bit more defense, because black has some great blockers and defensive options. So for the most part, that's just the deck. It is definitely a pretty powerful deck because there is just a lot of built-in self-synergy, and you could create some really sticky and hard-to-deal with boards that allow you to aggress or pressure the opponent into some really bad setups. As always, I'll have the deck list in the description below. Feel free to tell me in the comments down below your thoughts about the deck, or if you have any questions, comments about the deck, feel free to leave it down there as well. And as always, don't forget to like and subscribe for more content, and I will see you in the next video.